Hello, my name is Richard Anthony Marca, and this is our second CSC323 prep assignment. This time we have 10 things to look over, so I will start with this big old picture where it talks about the basics of cloud storage, like what is cloud storage and how it works. Gives us an example of using cloud storage. Also talks about the security and the pricing and how to use it. Then we go to the IAM Best Practices Guidelines, where it talks about the three core guides of using Google Cloud Identity and Access Management. First, for using it securely, there are four major categories. It is a least privileged service, so it grants only the permissions that are required, and it avoids overly broad predefined roles. Also talks about service accounts and key management, talks about auditing, and it talks about policy management. The second core guide is the designing resources hierarchy, which there are three hierarchy levels: organization, project, and resource, where the organization is on the top and applies to everything beneath. The project is the trust boundary where policies apply to resources in that project, and resources, which is a fine-grained control for specific assets, like BigQuery data sets or pub/sub topics. And the last core guide is understanding service accounts, which service accounts are identities for applications and virtual machines. Next, we go to this other Google Cloud website talking about Google Cloud Client Libraries. So it goes over a list of the libraries that it can use, like Go, Java, Node.js, Python, Ruby, PHP, C Sharp, and C++. Also, if you want to experiment with different APIs, there's also the Google API Explorer to find more. And you download cloud client libraries for individual cloud services. And you could use cloud client libraries with Cloud Code, which is tools in VS Code, IntelliJ, and Cloud Shell for developing cloud applications. So you don't even have to use your IDE. You could just go inside and use the cloud client libraries inside of Cloud. Next, we have the authentication methods at Google, which is about authentication, proving who is making a request, determining what the identity is allowed to do with authorization. Credentials are secrets used to authenticate, like an OAuth token, service account keys, API keys, and so on. Principals, the identities, users, service accounts, groups, workloads to know who's who, and tokens, which are short-lived credentials used to access Google APIs. The main authentication methods this document explains is the application default credentials, or ADC, which are unified ways for apps to obtain credentials automatically. It works locally and in production, and it's recommended for most cloud libraries. Also talks about service accounts, workload identity federation, for example, like AWS, Azure on-prem, in order to authenticate to Google Cloud without service account keys. API keys, which are simple, but they are limited. This document also talks about choosing the right method on when you're using Google Cloud, and talks about some best practices. And this document is a product overview of cloud storage. So it talks about different things in cloud, like organizations, objects, buckets, folders, managed folders. It also talks about the different tools you can use with cloud storage, like the Google Cloud Console, the G Cloud CLI, the client libraries as discussed before, REST APIs, Terraform, gRPC, and Cloud Storage Fuse. Also talks about the different security and data protections like IAM, or Identity and Access Management, and that the encryption is server-side encryption by default, where you could, for an optional case, use customer managed keys and customer supplied keys. It talks about different type of authentication, that Google Cloud has a soft delete, which is enabled by default with 7-day retention for deleted objects and buckets in case you accidentally delete something, you can get it back. Object versioning, which retains non-current versions when objects are overwritten or deleted. Bucket IP filtering, which restricts access based on source IP or VPC. Bucket lock, which enforce retention policies for compliance. Talks about alternative storage options if cloud storage isn't the right fit, like Google Cloud Managed Lustre, Google Drive, Google Cloud Storage for Firebase, Persistent Disk, and File Store, which each are for different circumstances. Next is a very short video about Google Cloud Storage. It's about a minute long, and it's just a very basic overview of Google Cloud. This video talks about service accounts, gives us examples and the difference between service accounts and user accounts, defines what a service account is, and it talks about how to list service accounts using gcloud commands. The next video is about creating, managing, and retiring service accounts, so you know how to deal with accounts when you need to get rid of them or change them. This is a video about how to secure your server accounts, and this video is about how to store data on Google Cloud. So it talks about Google Storage, Firestore, BigQuery, and Google Cloud SQL. And that is it for this video. It's a little bit less detailed because there were 10 things to look over. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.